I'm Janeane. This is KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine, and this is Get the Funk Out. Standing by to join me is Director Hasan Oswald, and we're going to talk about his award-winning film that won the 2020 SLAMDANCE Grand Jury Prize. Amazing. It's called Higher Love. I really enjoyed it. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Janeane. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on.
How does that feel to be a SLAMDANCE Grand Jury winner and then all these other accolades and other festivals?
Yeah, it's surreal. So just a little background. We're a really young film team and new to the industry, especially myself. I was a first-time filmmaker. I used to be an English teacher. So this was kind of my film school, this project, this Camden film, Higher Love. Yeah. So it was surreal. And it's a shame that the rest of our festival run got moved online, but still we're proud of, as you mentioned, the other accolades we brought home.
Right.
But yeah, when they made that announcement, it was pretty mind-blowing.
Wow. I just want to mention the other festivals. So you're in the Brooklyn Film Festival. You won the Spirit Award and Best New Director. Whoa.
Yes.
Krakow International, DocuFest.
Yeah, and that was.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and we had probably, I think we've been in 15 or 20 festivals now, and five or six awards.
Amazing.
And yeah, we're wrapping that up, but we still have 2 or 3 more as well.
How did this all come about? How did you decide to do this project?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I wasn't even in the film industry leading up to this project. So Camden is where Higher Love takes place, and Camden, New Jersey is only an hour and a half from where I live in New York City. So, I was a one-man team at this time with no budget, very little experience. So it was a movie that I could do. I realized very quickly that I was kind of in over my head. Camden is known as one, if not the most dangerous city in America, year in and year out. Not only street violence, but also it's what our film covers is the opioid epidemic.
Yes.
So there's a lot of facets that I didn't really fully take into account before I headed there with no budget and no team. And
just
little
yourself.
Experience.
You just went by yourself?
Myself. Yeah, just knocking on doors. And what initially attracted me to the city was, so my father was from Camden back when it was predominantly white Italian. And that was when it was a boom town, kind of before the fall of this American industrial dream.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very similar to Flint, Michigan, or Detroit. It was a boom town. And then when the factories left, it kind of crumbled. And so this was a city that I wanted to investigate, but also, if there's an issue in America, Camden's kind of like a petri dish. If there's an issue in America, it's definitely taking place in Camden.
A reflection of what's going on.
Yeah, very a reflection at an exaggerated rate as well.
At what point did Camden disintegrate? About what year was this?
So this is like the 60s. It was kind of, and it began before that, but the real demographic change happened then. The jobs left, and with that vacuum, a lot of that was filled by nefarious means. And as I mentioned, it's pretty much an open air drug market to this day.
Wow. Where did the idea for doing this film come from? Obviously, you said your dad, but what made you want to submerge yourself in this?
Yeah, so it was doable, as I mentioned, just because I had no budget. But so this film was actually called Below the Brine up until, one of our last edits. And that's after a Walt Whitman poem, Walt Whitman's actually from Camden, New Jersey.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's a poem that that describes a world that takes place below the brine that nobody ever looks at. No one ever stops to see. So I felt like that fit Camden perfectly. It's a drive-by city. It's a flyover city. If you've heard of it, if you're from the East Coast, it's definitely
I'm from the East Coast. I have heard of it.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm sure it's got a negative connotation. Even myself, as when I drive in the region growing up, it was always, lock your doors, don't stop for gas here. And so that's kind of why we opened the film in the way we did, with kind of, a radio show blasting Camden, New Jersey. So that, I had honestly kind of a morbid curiosity with the city. and I had wanted to go tell this story of post-industrial decay. And it wasn't only going to be Camden, but once I got there, I realized that, I fell in love with the Camdenites, the people.
Yeah.
But also, I found that it was a story that needed to be told. This is a world that very few people see.
Yes.
And so I decided to stay for 2.5 years.
Do you feel like so many people just look the other way? Like they don't want to even think about it because of the reputation?
Definitely. Even so, it is seen as people kind of shun it and, say that's a Camden problem, or why would you choose to live in Camden? Why would you, if you're a drug addict in Camden or someone's suffering from addiction, you made that choice.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of attracted me to it even more because, I knew that no one wakes up and chooses to lose their family, their life savings, their car, their house, and live in the gutter in Camden, New Jersey as a heroin addict.
Right.
No one makes that conscious decision. There are steps that happen there,
Yeah.
whether it's a cause of systemic neglect, which is the case in a lot of cities like similar to Camden, or with the issues, it's a myriad of issues. So that kind of, my view of Camden as kind of this petri dish of systemic neglect. And yes, opioids take kind of the main thread of this film, but really there's a lot of themes that you can kind of parse out in this film.
Was it hard to get permission from people to be on camera?
No. So I didn't, as I mentioned, I was a first-time filmmaker. I didn't know what I didn't know. Probably I broke so many unwritten rules and written rules about getting this done. But I think that was kind of how it turned out so well. I didn't have a budget. I didn't have anything. So I had to meet these characters where they were. And as I mentioned, these characters this city hasn't had a voice in 60 years, 70 years.
It's so sad.
So, yeah. So you'd think, yes, a lot of people ask me, why would they be doing and selling drugs and admitting to all these things in camera? But I found that, this film finally provided, of course, at a very small level, but provided them some bit of agency, these characters, to tell their story. The city's been ignored. These people have been ignored for decades.
Right.
So no, they opened their lives and their stories up to me right away, gave me an incredible amount of trust that resulted in this, kind of raw, rare access that they granted me with. And it was kind of from day one that they just showed me everything, whether it was drug use or their, heartbreaking pasts. They just gave me everything.
It was really heartbreaking. I mean, to step inside and see a glimpse of their day-to-day. How did you decide how did you pick the certain people, and how did that, resonate with you to choose the people you did?
Sure, yeah. So it had actually started out with probably 8 different profiles, kind of vignettes that we were piecing together. And, this was also my inexperience. Our first cut was 5 hours long, and it was heart-wrenching for me to cut anything. Finally, we had brought on Kate Plum, our amazing editor, who started to, separate the good stuff from the trash, or not the trash, but the less compelling storylines.
Sure.
So I had met the group of Nani and her friends the morning of. So one of those first scenes is that motel where they're all sleeping and injecting, and so I had met them first, and I received an angry phone call that night from someone who I didn't know, and he was screaming at me, who are you? You're exploiting my girlfriend. She's pregnant. And I thought, oh, it must be Nani, who I had filmed. I was filming with a lot of people, but Nani was definitely one who, she's a beautiful pregnant woman who was working the streets of Camden. So obviously there's something to drive a narrative thread right there. And I knew that. But I was terrified. And he said, well, let me meet up with you. I was like, all right, I can either go meet up with him or leave Camden. So I met up with him, and that turned out to be Daryl, the protagonist of the film. And he said, well, you're going to show her side. Let me show you my side of the story. So
Okay.
his side of the story was, this decades long of, every day, every other day, searching for Nani and through the streets of Camden. And now it was at kind of the tipping point because she was pregnant with her
Yeah.
child. So right away I knew that, this is like almost like a script, the way
Hmm.
this is coming together.
Right.
So, and Daryl himself, you could push an entire, series. He's very charismatic, well-spoken, loves to
Yes.
talk. And we're actually working on a scripted version of this right now, based on Daryl. So I knew right
Wait,
away when I
excuse
had
me.
met
Did he have
Daryl.
8 kids?
Yes, he has. Darnez is his eighth kid. They're all grown. So the youngest is now 18.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's very supportive of financially, and he's a great father to them seven, and they try him
Hmm.
in a lot of ways. He struggles with it. So Darnez was kind of a new start with obviously a much younger child. That was the plan for that child,
Yeah.
for Darnez. And I don't think he anticipated the resistance of Nani to kind of turn things around. And so he had thought that Darnez would change Nani's heart, and she would, see something would click, and she
Right.
would give up her addiction uh, in order to save their son. So yeah, it's a frustrating, it's cyclical, and you kind of want to scream at Daryl sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's the love of his life for the last
Addiction
decade
is
and a half.
so deeply embedded in you, whether it's genetically, whether it's just everything you've been doing all these years. And it's so sad to see her in this
Yeah,
state. And I'm thinking, what's her backstory? What led her to be an addict? It's
yeah,
so sad.
yeah. And she explains it briefly in the film, that
Right.
she comes from a lot of a childhood filled with a lot of trauma, a
Yeah.
lot of physical abuse. Both of her parents were addicts. Her father died with a needle in his arm, as Daryl says it.
Mm,
So it is, and she says, I think it was in my genes to want to get high. And there is that aspect of it. And then,
yeah.
she grew up in a city like Camden, where uh, that is right at your fingertips, on
Right.
every corner, on every stoop. So it's a bad combination.
Yeah.
And you can see that where, Daryl is struggling to leave that cycle of his own addictions, and hopefully, start something new. And he succeeds somewhat. And she's just, kind of unable to just break out of
Sure.
that addiction. And
Yeah.
most people are unable to break out of that addiction.
Right. What, when you wrapped the film, you must have felt like a different person having submersed yourself in this environment and this story. In a sense, it's sad thinking what's going to happen to these people.
Yeah, and it was my first film. And you build relationships with your characters, whether you plan to or not, or whether the viewer may see them as finishing the film in a positive light.
Right.
And they give you a lot. They give you a lot of time, unpaid time. They give you a
Hmm.
lot of, I always say, if someone wanted to do a documentary on me, it'd be really hard if the camera was turned, because look what Daryl opens up to on camera. Look what these people open up to on camera. They give you a lot. And it's hard. I'm on red carpets and doing press runs, and you leave, whether it's very hard to not leave your characters, even with the best intention. You leave them where you found them. Daryl and I have a great relationship. We talk a lot, but there, I'm moving on right now. I'm in Turkey on my way to Iraq. I'm on my next project.
Hmm.
um, and I'm doing a press run for Higher Love, and he's kind of uh, back there, and they all are back there. So it is
Yeah.
tough building relationships with these people, and then um, somehow justifying moving on, whether or not the film is successful, whether or not they're portrayed in the best possible light. It's difficult. So I left this film uh, um, kind of in no man's land. Of I didn't know what the protocol was. I knew that these were my friends, but I also knew that
Yeah.
I had a career that was just starting.
Yes.
um, and so it's really hard to keep the balance between your characters, especially characters who are in dangerous situations, Darnez or Nani.
Right.
um, it was hard, but it really did prepare me I always say that one of the first interviews I had in Camden was he he was talking about, it didn't make the film, but he was talking about how if you wake up and you're not from Camden in a street, you'd think you're from Iraq. You think you're in Iraq, and how all the politicians are all fighting about what's going on in the Middle East and trying to rebuild and give them democracy. Meanwhile, this American city that built the American dream is crumbling. And then, without even knowing it, now 3 years later, I'm back and forth between Iraq. And that was kind of a sign for me that, it really prepared me for this next film.
Sure.
It's, I dealt with a lot of, or am dealing with things that might be, described as PTSD things from my time in Camden, and kind of, I jumped into the fire over there, whether it was the numerous, overdoses, or just drug usage, or the stress of being in such a dangerous city. It really prepped me for this film in Iraq. And I always say that, I'm more readily, or I'm more willing to go to, I would say even excited to go to Iraq back and forth. I've been there 5 times now.
Okay.
Than I ever was for Camden. But I give that not to Camden being this kind of hellhole of fear and violence, just that I learned so much there. That was my film school as a first-time filmmaker.
Wow.
I learned, not only the technical aspects of filmmaking, but I learned, how to deal with characters, and how to build and fortify these relationships, how to leave these relationships, how to not make false promises. And it really helped make this next film, what it hopefully, I think it'll be a special film.
Is your next film a documentary as well?
Yeah, so the next film we're wrapping now. I'm in Turkey, headed to Iraq and then Syria next week. So it covers the Yazidi genocide and captives who were taken by ISIS as predominantly sex slaves back in 2014, and there's still 3,000 of them still in captivity. So we're working with a team of volunteer rescuers who are trying to bring these kids home from ISIS captivity. So
that is amazing, Hasan.
Yeah,
amazing.
It's exciting, and yeah, we're happy.
Did you always want to be a filmmaker? Maybe a little piece of you years ago when you were
Never. I went to a Waldorf school, which means you're not even allowed to. We didn't have a TV in our house until my teens. I wasn't allowed to watch movies. I was never like a big film buff. I always say like I didn't even. My favorite movie was Waterworld by far, which is like a terrible movie.
Was that Kevin Costner or something?
Yeah, Kevin Costner. Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah. I would just rent it. I would be allowed to watch one movie a month until like my teens, and I would always rent Waterworld. So I had no film background.
That is sad.
Yeah, I know. But I always liked storytelling. I studied creative writing and journalism in college. And I moved to Thailand after I graduated, and then to Spain and Germany as an English teacher.
Amazing.
But I always kept this kind of urge to tell stories in the back of my mind, and I would take little travel videos and do little street interviews, and that definitely provided this kind of spark into documentary film. And once I found it, I thought this encompasses everything that I've ever wanted to do. Whether it's I'm very comfortable living abroad or traveling nonstop. I love being on the road. It's obviously storytelling. It's a creative medium that we're in. I learned everything on YouTube and through podcasts. I didn't have any formal training. I learned editing and sold my blood twice a week to buy cameras and yeah. So I did it like a very guerrilla gonzo style. That everything. If you want to enter film, or whether it's you want to learn guitar or baking, like there's something online. There's definitely something online to learn how to do it. So that's how I learned editing and cinematography, and then just kind of production was always there as kind of my storytelling background.
Where did you go to college, by the way?
Villanova University, right outside Philly. Yeah, and I didn't have any I didn't have any urge to become a filmmaker. I had made one of those travel videos I made about the refugee crisis. I went to the Greek islands when the Syrian refugee crisis was happening,
Okay.
and a few famous people tweeted it, and National Geographic saw it. And I still had no intention of working in documentary film. I was making little stupid travel videos, and I was supposed to. I got into Columbia to do my master's in education, and I kept deferring it because I didn't know what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And then National Geographic someone tweeted it. National Geographic saw it and hired me the next week to go film for them in the Middle East. And that was kind of my.
And you had just learned filming on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I I still have imposter syndrome, but that was serious imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But the crew I was working with was amazing. I ended up not only shooting for them in the Middle East, but continued with the crew back in New York, and the editor and producer and Higher Love are from that same team. So I learned a lot, and took some of the team with me as well.
Amazing. Let me ask you this before we wrap up, because my show is called Get the Funk Out.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like to ask, when you are feeling down about yourself, whether it's imposter syndrome or anything, personally, professionally, what do you do, especially right now with COVID, what do you do to stay positive? Like, do you have any kind of routine or something you do that you say to yourself?
Yeah, so I mean, I shouldn't be in the kind of position I'm in as far as film. I didn't in an industry that's built on kind of a unmoving hierarchy. I didn't really pay my dues, which I know rubs a lot of the old heads the wrong way. But I kind of overcame that by uh, faking it till I made it. Not only in Camden, where if anyone asks me when I'm filming Higher Love, I had no idea what I was doing, but I acted like I did.
Okay.
And I've carried that with me for everything. So,
Wait, excuse me. Was it also
yeah.
when you started filming, you didn't have a clear vision of the end goal of the film and then it kind of evolved? Or did you have a clear idea of point A, point B? It evolved.
No, I had no idea. I thought I would go and film a concept of like 30 minutes, have this awesome thing, and go back to New York City and find funding. That never happened. I thought maybe it would be episodic.
Yeah.
That never happened. So the end product was kind of a surprise, although I believed in it the whole time. I mean, that's kind of what I was just talking about, that I kind of believe it's not manifestation or The Secret or anything, but I believed the whole time that film was going to be, or that project was going to be successful.
Yeah.
I never really had a doubt that I was going to be able to at least make it at an entry level position in film, no matter how hard it'd be to get there. And then that ended up, I skipped a few steps. But I'm every morning, I guess,
Grateful.
grateful, but also incredibly positive, especially with what's going on with COVID. I mean, it didn't change that much as far as we're a small crew. We don't have that many issues. We are slowed down by COVID, as everyone is, but because I wear all the hats as far as editing, or I can wear. Now we've got an amazing team, but I can edit. We all can edit. Actually, we all can shoot. We all can produce. So we're very.
It's great.
Yeah, we're not slowed down by the pandemic at all.
Good.
Yeah.
So where can people find out more about you and the film?
Sure. Me personally, well, they could just, if they go to the website is higherlovefilm.com, and that's Higher Love Film on Instagram and Twitter as well. Instagram is our most active, and we do a lot of really cool kind of behind the scenes stuff of not only my mishaps in Camden, but also a lot of behind the scenes as far as characters that didn't make the final cut.
Okay.
And kind of shots of this dilapidated American city. So that's Higher Love Film on Instagram, and then from there, I'm linked as the director to my personal page, and I'd love to connect with anyone, whether they're in the film industry or just general. I love I've been doing Q&As now for almost 8 months for our festival run, and I used to hate it, but now, I really appreciate people who come with questions and people such as yourself who give
Fantastic.
platforms.
Well, congratulations. And it is exactly where you're meant to be, is where you are, You got to
Yes,
get rid of
and
that. I'm sure you're done with the imposter syndrome thing. Maybe.
yeah, maybe, but I think I keep some of it as like a chip on my shoulder to continue to,
Work harder.
work
learn
harder.
more.
Exactly. So I probably am done with it, but I'm keeping a little bit of it
Keeps you
on my
humble.
shoulder. Keeps me
Keeps you
humble, yes,
humble.
and hardworking.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you so much. So you called in from Turkey?
Yes, I'm in Ankara, Turkey now. I've been here for about 2 weeks, and we're just wrapping up this film. So we should have another one to talk about in a few months.
I would love that. So keep in touch and let me know.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you, Hasan.
Nice to meet you too, Janeane.